Hello everyone, Tom Cherryholmes here with the FujiNet project with a status report on the CIO handler. I've spent the last week basically doing a quick port of the prototype of the CIO handler, which I had written in C, and moved it over to assembler. There's still a lot of optimization and a lot of functionality to take and push through, but as of right now, it is on a feature parity with the prototype that was written in C, with some improvements because the C driver had some serious problems with it, namely that it was messing around in zero page and I wasn't able to effectively take and preserve state while going in and out of the routines that needed to be done, the get, put, etc. So just kind of a quick little run through of where things are sitting at this particular moment in time. We'll start by going into just a DOS2 installation with the assembler version of the driver here. We see right here that we go immediately to FujiNet ready. Okay, the driver's running, and at this particular point, we can, of course, use the network as before. Or a host name, doesn't matter. Again, fetched entirely off the web server, as we saw before, no problem there. And, of course, while that's also happening, there are other little interesting programs that are sitting on this particular disk, like, let's say, for example, the world's simplest dumb terminal. And as far as this is concerned, I'm actually going to keep this as is just to prove a particular point. One thing is that we absolutely don't need to explicitly set interrupts anymore. So we can get rid of this. And this. To make it even simpler. And as you can see, works just fine. But also, just to take this point across as to how cross-platform this actually is, we're going to change the URL ever so slightly to reference something off of HTTP. One second. Let me get the URL correct here. Give me just a moment. So we can see right there, grab this text here, and we're actually going to fetch this using an HTTP GET request, which is what happens by default. And you'll see that with no other changes, other than just changing the URL that's being sent to the end device, we're now receiving the text of the GPL. And since we're receiving this one character at a time, it actually is, coming in as fast as it could. But if we made a couple of changes, we could, for example, And yes, I am going off script, and I am probably going to get beaten for this. I'll remove line 110, and we'll do 130 here. Just like that. So now we're not getting one character at a time, but we're getting one line at a time. And there we go. So now we can see the difference between doing a get character and a get record. And as you can see, we're using all the standard I/O idioms, and it's just working. Regardless of whether we're doing TCP connections, HTTP connections, UDP connections, SSH, doesn't matter. The Atari takes and abstracts all of that and provides a nice clean I/O channel. Go ahead and close that off again. And I've already shown the tic-tac-toe program, so I won't really go into that here. But we'll actually take and now actually boot into a couple of other DOSes just to kind of show where things are at. Or actually, let's do something even more interesting. I'm going to reboot. And actually, let me hold down Option. And we're going to select a particular disk here. We have right here a copy of AtariWriter in disk form. It's kind of interesting because it also has the nhandler driver on it as well. We'll boot it. We come up to DOSXL, and we see we have a few things on here. Let's go ahead and set the in prefix. Now again, as I've mentioned before, the in prefix allows you to prepend a particular protocol URL onto in as if you typed it out longhand. And this can help in programs where, for example, it expects any device other than D not to have a file name or limited to 8 characters with 3 character extensions. So you can handle both by setting a prefix. In our case, we're going to set a prefix for here. And then we're going to start up the end device handler. Then we're going to take and start up AtariWriter. Now I happen to know the URL of a particular document that I want to take and pull off of the network, off of an HTTP server, and I'll pull it right in. Watch this. Boom. And there we go. We just had AtariWriter pull a document off of an HTTP server directly into AtariWriter. Go ahead and load another file. Yes. And there we go. And interestingly enough, because of the way HTTP works, if we actually tried to do something that didn't exactly exist, it would still be okay, but we would see here the 404 response as a result of this coming through. So, there you go. Again, completely and utterly transparent. Ta-da! Okay, so we will now actually take and boot again, and this time boot into a totally exotic DOS here. And actually, cold start. We will go to my exotics folder. And actually, I want to show a particular problem that's actually popping up that I'm currently trying to solve right now. We'll go to DOS2. The memory map for this particular handler needs to be done in such a way that the disk utility package doesn't take and overwrite what's happening. And so basically, this will happen regardless of whether memsave works or not here, so I'm just going to demonstrate the problem actually happening. If we have a network prefix loaded here, and we say we want to take and load in something from the network, we're actually going to see that it froze here. And it froze literally because dup just wrote over my handler. It's just kind of sitting here going, crap, okay. So there are a couple ways we can handle this particular problem. One that we definitely need to do, we need to get the handler down small enough. And if we can get the handler down small enough, we can use bits and pieces of memory that are not normally used to take and hold handler and handler states, just take and push it in such a way that we can put the handler in places where the disk utility package won't take and write over it. Another thing that we can do is we can actually take and load the N handler up into high memory, and in certain cases this might actually be desirable. And the third thing that we can do is we can take and make a series of utility programs which take and do the network reads and writes, etc. over SIO directly, not using the SIO handler, so that we can sidestep problematic DOSes that have these particular issues. Moving ahead, we'll actually take and reboot here. And we will boot into MyDOS. MyDOS fares a bit better with this. It's not perfect, it's not 100%, but it does work for certain things, which you'll see here. And I'm going to delete this file here. This was something that was happening as a result of my copy. But the N driver is actually loaded into memory and ready to go, which we can verify by loading an N prefix. And we can set up the N prefix for okay, make sure that loads in, sure, no problem. And of course I can take now and you'll see right here it's actually taking and copying the file buried bucks all the way over onto the drive off the HTTP server. It's happening rather transparently. There is an interesting little quirk here that I have to work out, but you'll see here that the file name got somewhat truncated because MyDOS got confused, but the file got copied over correctly. And this is actually one of the reasons, you'll actually see this is actually one of the reasons why, we'll do this again, and the reason why N prefix works the way that it does. We'll reset the N prefix. Oops, sorry. And we'll actually set the prefix such that let's see. We'll set it that it maps directly to the single file, so that when we do the copy, that we don't get any surprises. And this is the reason why in prefix that we have the ability to set up a prefix here. If we look now, we'll see the file has the correct name, and regardless of which, we can actually take and load it up. Now, normally we would be able to take and load it directly from that device, but for whatever reason, MyDOS doesn't seem to be happy with what's coming in for whatever reason, and I need to see what's happening. For some reason, we're getting an error 146, even though if I take and load the resulting file that got carried over, so there's a little bit of a glitch here, and it only happens in MyDOS. Moving forward, we'll go to another DOS here. Something slightly more bizarre. OSA 4.1. Sure, why the hell not? We'll boot in. And as part of this, we see our files here. We can go ahead, load in the end device. Boom, ready to go. At this point, then we can take and, since we already have a prefix set, I'm going to go ahead and set the in prefix again. As you can see, it works just fine. Okay. And if we go ahead and set, since we have a prefix set for that particular address, if we were to take and bounce out into BASIC, it will automatically prepend. Oops, I have to load the M drive for it. You can see that it just does the right thing here because the prefix is set. And the prefix will stay set until the device gets reset. Furthermore, again, no matter what, if I take and load the clients, whatever, you can see. And one of the interesting things here, because we have the prefix set, it's actually taking connecting out. But again, it all just works as expected. So, I mean, that's where we're at this particular point in time. It's starting to come together, but I need some help. I need people who are experienced in writing assembler to take the device code that I've written, the handler code that I've written, try to make it smaller and more efficient. CIO supports what's called burst mode, which can be used to drastically speed up the I/O operations by taking and essentially doing all of the character transfer from CIO into the target buffer in one swipe instead of a single CIO transaction for each individual character. We also need to take and make the buffers smaller. Right now, for the sake of simplicity, I made them 256 byte buffers. We can take and make this much smaller. We need to take and make it fit into a smaller space so it can be even more compatible than it is right now. And any help that I can get on that, I could really very much appreciate. But at least for now, I wanted to show you guys kind of where I was at. So, I mean, until next time, guys, have fun.